Okay, so common problem that comes up a lot is people like to obsess about anatomy, especially when I see critique being offered. So what I mean by this is when I'm in a Discord and watching people offer critiques, usually that critique is something like, oh, this arm is too short or too long, or something wrong with, the hand looks weird or whatnot. And the problem is not anatomy. The problem is usually the figure drawing, the underlying figure drawing. So, what's figure drawing? Well, easiest way for me to explain it is to look at motion capture. So, if we look at motion capture, you see what you often see are people wearing these goofy suits with reflectors and sensors all over them. And I believe, let's find one where we can actually just see the skeleton. Wow, lots and lots of goofy suits. Aha. Now this is kind of cool. All right, so motion capture is actually just capturing pure motion. And if you want to talk about figure drawing, you want to talk about something like, say, gesture, for instance. That's another term that comes up very often. This would be probably the closest equivalent to something like a digital gesture, because it's showing the actual coordinate information. You're getting positional, rotational, and coordinate information of the body, what it's doing, how it's moving, where the forces are being exerted. You get this actual action that's what a gesture is. And so it's coordinate information. It does have information like it will have some perspective information. It will have some proportional information, but it doesn't exactly look like a human being. But you do get this feeling for, the motion that's going on. Let's see if we can see any other GIFs like that, right? So again, that is usually what you need to focus on first. Because when people start, I'm just going to say, earlier on, when people say, oh, the arm is too long. Well, here's an example, right? So let's say I have a person who's like this. Then I'm going to take their arm and I'm going to stretch it out towards the camera, back to the point where their hand goes off the screen. So their shoulder would be up here, and I can draw their body down like this, right? So now you've got their legs. So their arm is so long, it's like it's practically going off of the frame, right? So the thing about perspective is that the mere fact that we have a thing called foreshortening, that objects can actually, we can push something towards the camera to the point where it goes beyond the camera. An object can basically reach infinite size. So the problem is not usually this is too big or too small or it's too long. Because like I said, as soon as something covers the camera, its size becomes infinity. So if I draw a stick figure, right? So people are used to seeing stick figures where the arm is exactly that long, and they're used to seeing, the legs go this far down and the head's like that. But the moment you introduce perspective in there, and we do something like, say, here, let's have the person seated. We'll have one leg up here. We'll have another leg coming down this way. So I'm going to move this towards the camera. Right now, boom, it goes off the side of the camera. So it just, this concept of something being too long or too short, you have to instead, it's only comparative, right? You have to look at how large something is after it's been distorted by the powers of perspective and foreshortening. And then we can start talking about whether or not something is too long or too short. So it's about, getting things relative. So again, it's not that people don't know anatomy. Most people don't even have to have a great knowledge of anatomy. They can look at a drawing which has anatomical flaws in it. And even if that person doesn't know that, doesn't exactly know how anatomy works, or, doesn't know all the bones and all the muscles and everything, the thing is that they've been around people long enough that when they see if they see a drawing of a person and the anatomy doesn't quite match up, they know something's wrong, right? It's just instinctual. So what you should focus on really is figure drawing, because with figure drawing is this. Figure drawing is, first you need that, you don't have to have the gesture, but the gesture helps. The gesture is that motion capture data. It's the bare minimum notation data so that you can complete a drawing from that. It's enough information that you can tell what that person or character was doing. And it doesn't necessarily have to have anatomy on it. There's no muscles that have to be drawn. It's just this, I guess you could call it a body flow, right? Where you've got a rough idea of the void space that the person's body is taking up. It's a spatial flow, right? Now, afterwards, you can go in there and then you can start overlaying your anatomical knowledge, and you can start figuring out, okay, well, we got some muscles here. And the thing is that you don't have to draw every single muscle that exists in the human body, because when we look at real people, we don't see every single muscle unless they're really swole, right? That's about it. So you don't have to draw every single piece of anatomical information, right? But I think it's just a tendency for people to focus on something that's more superficial, and they're just not, they're focusing on the surface level information. They're not, digging deeper to the structural information, which would be the figure drawing. And what you need more than anatomy knowledge is kinesiology. You need to know kinesiology, which would be the study of human movement, knowing how far you can move an arm back, or how far you can move it forward, or where are the joint limits, how far can you bend inwards and bend outwards, right? Those are more important things. When does a pose look awkward? When does the character look very uncomfortable and unbalanced and look like they're unintentionally about to fall over? Those things are way more important, right? You're trying to avoid that kind of awkwardness, unintentional awkwardness. And that comes from better figure drawing. So that's what you got to work on, not just anatomy. Anatomy is like, that's just the coating of paint that goes over the house, over the foundation. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say. It's just, focus on figure drawing, focus on being able to get your gesture. Actually, you know what? Why don't I talk about how to capture gesture? So you can see that the way that I draw these lines here. Let's talk a little bit about this. So this comes back to the hatching stuff that you probably saw me doing in my last video, where I can take lines and I can use this hatching to make the lines come closer and closer and closer. And we were talking all about, using the lines like a 3D printer pen, right? We can do all this stuff, right? So the gesture uses the same stuff, right? It's just not as accurately placed. Not sloppy, but it's not as accurately placed. And so there's perspective being used here. And so this stuff is really good for being able to capture a person who's sitting down, for instance. So I'm just going to plant their butt over here. And I'm just trying to capture their body flow. I'm not even worrying about anatomy. I'm just worrying about the void space that they're going to use up. Right? They're going to occupy that void space. So a person sitting down. How about a person who's, I don't know what to do, the cannonball. So we're going to curl them up in a bit of a fetal position. So this person is now airborne. They're in cannonball position. So I want them to, really hug their knees, and I want the head, maybe the chin, to actually touch the knee. And then I'll have to wrap their arms around the outside. So I'm not, right, again, I don't try to draw any particular line. I'm just trying to, maybe what I'll do is I'll take one of these arms and I'll wrap it high, and then the other one I'll wrap low. So they're going parallel, but they're, going, there we are, right? So that would be, and maybe that looks a little too, kind of let's extend that a bit, right? So you just kind of can look at your own drawing. This is another important thing, is actually stop always asking other people to criticize your drawings for you, right? Learn to develop your own sense. You can't always depend on other people to critique your work for you, especially when it comes to the vast number of people out there who just are armchair artists, people who never post their freaking work and just say, oh, this looks wrong and that looks wrong, and they can't give you any useful advice. So, learn to be like, you've got to be able to critique your own artwork. That's what makes you a good artist. Like, good artists don't always have to lean on other people to tell them when things are wrong. Right? So just don't become dependent on other people pointing out your flaws for you. Move that over. So again, just a really simple, kind of a slightly intricate gesture. And they shouldn't take you too long. Or you should be working towards, getting some speed. Here's another thing you can do, is that if you're having things which are doing a lot of foreshortening, then you can draw a cross section. So your lines don't always have to be, you don't always have to draw laminar flow. Right? Laminar flow is where the lines go along with, right? Whereas you can do this perpendicular cross-sectional notation. Right? This is what you do when you have a lot of foreshortening. Right, so just practice this kind of stuff until you get really comfortable with it. And again, it's like, it's going to be hard at first. That's going to be a struggle. You got to struggle through it until it's easy. That's the price. Okay, that's enough.